A doctor dies in the emergency room, and what she saw on the other side will change your perspective on life forever. Her name is Mariana Herrera, and she claims that her experience with death revealed something that science cannot explain. What happens after we die? Is it the end or the beginning of something greater? What Jesus showed her will leave you speechless. Stay until the end, because this story could change your destiny. My name is Herrera, and today, after all that I have lived through, I know that death is not the end. It is only the beginning. I never imagined that my life would change forever. That day, I grew up believing in science, in what could be proven with data and evidence. I was an emergency physician, used to seeing death up close, facing despair in the hallways of a hospital, fighting for lives when everything seemed lost. But what I never thought was that one day, the person in my own life would be me, and even less that I would die and come back with a message that I cannot ignore. What I saw, what I felt, what I experienced beyond the threshold of life and death, challenges everything I thought I knew, because in that moment, I understood that death is not the end, and what lies on the other side is something that no one is prepared to hear. But before I tell you what I saw, let me take you to the exact moment when everything changed forever. It was an ordinary Tuesday, or at least that's what it seemed. My shift at the hospital had started at 6 in the morning. The routine was the same as always. Patients coming and going, nurses rushing through the hallways, monitor alarms sounding non-stop. I had been working in the emergency room for over 6 years, and nothing surprised me. I had seen pain in its rawest form. I had been face to face with death so many times that it had become almost mechanical for me. But that morning, there was something different. I didn't notice it right away, but something in the atmosphere felt different. The emergency room, which was usually overflowing, felt strangely calm, as if the hospital was holding its breath before something big happened. At 10:30 in the morning, I was attending to a teenager with a broken arm. I remember the sun coming through the windows and casting shadows on the floor. Everything seemed so normal, so routine until it happened. Without warning, I felt an unbearable pain in my chest. It was as if an invisible force was crushing my heart with all its might. I barely had time to take a step back before my entire body collapsed. I couldn't breathe. I tried to speak to call for help, but the words wouldn't come out. My vision blurred, and the sounds around me grew distant, as if I were drifting away from everything. The last thing I heard before falling to the ground was the voice of a patient calling for help. Then, darkness. I was told I suffered a massive pulmonary embolism. A blood clot had traveled to my lungs and blocked circulation. It was unexpected, but not inexplicable. The doctors found that I had a congenital clotting disorder of which I had never known. My body was a ticking time bomb, and that day it exploded. But the most shocking part was not the embolism. The most shocking part was what happened while my heart stopped beating. Because in those 5 minutes that the doctors fought to bring me back, I was no longer there. Darkness enveloped me completely. I couldn't feel my body. I couldn't hear anything. There was only an absolute void, an infinite silence, and then something changed. I was floating, not in a figurative sense. I was literally rising. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was my own body lying on the floor of the emergency room. From above, I could see everything. I saw my colleagues running. I saw Dr. Morales performing chest compressions on my chest. I saw the anguish on the faces of the nurses. Everything moved in slow motion, as if I were watching a movie. But the strangest thing was the peace I felt. There was no fear, no pain, just an absolute calm. And in that moment I realized something terrifying. If I could see my own body, It meant I was dead. But this was just the beginning, because what I saw next left me speechless. Stay until the end, because what I discovered beyond death will change everything you think you know about life. I felt no fear, no pain, just a strange calm enveloping me as I floated above my lifeless body. The scene around me was surreal, as if I were seeing everything from a parallel dimension. I saw Dr. Morales bent over me, his face tense as he performed chest compression. I saw my friend and colleague, Anna, preparing a dose of epinephrine with trembling hands and tears in her eyes. I knew they were struggling to bring me back, but I was no longer there. I was somewhere else, suspended in a reality I couldn't comprehend. What surprised me most was the feeling of lightness, as if the weight of my body no longer existed. I wasn't hungry, I wasn't cold. It was just pure consciousness, observing, feeling, understanding. But then, something changed. I felt a force pulling me upward, as if I were being absorbed by an invisible current. It wasn't frightening, but it was inevitable. And in that moment, the emergency room began to fade away. The light from the fluorescent lamps diluted, and in its place a vast darkness appeared, a void that enveloped everything. It wasn't a terrifying darkness, but more like a kind of transition. I wasn't alone, yet I could not see anyone. I felt a presence, something larger than me, something indescribable. And then I saw it. A brilliant light appeared in the distance, a light unlike anything in this world. It wasn't the sun, it wasn't a lamp. It was a living, warm, enveloping light. Instinctively, I began to move toward it. Or perhaps it wasn't me who decided to approach, but the light was calling me. As I stepped into that glow, I felt my mind expanding. Suddenly, I understood things that had previously seemed impossible to grasp. It was as if all the questions I had throughout my life found answers in an instant. Existence, purpose, the connection between all things. And then I crossed the threshold. What I saw on the other side defies all logic. It wasn't a physical place, but it wasn't empty either. It was a completely different dimension, filled with colors I'd never seen before. Sounds that weren't sounds in the traditional sense, but rather vibrations felt in the soul. The air was imbued with a harmony so perfect that it brought invisible tears to my being. And then a figure appeared before me. I didn't walk toward it, but somehow I immediately knew who it was. It was Jesus, not as I had seen him in paintings or sculptures, not as I had imagined in childhood stories. His presence was majestic and familiar at the same time. His light was brighter than that of any star, yet I could look at him without feeling pain in my eyes. His energy was pure love, infinite understanding, and in his gaze I felt he knew every part of me, every thought, every doubt, every fear, every mistake. And still in his eyes there was no judgment, only love. Jesus spoke to me, not with words, but with a message that resonated deep within my being. "It is not your time yet," he said in a voice that was not sound, but certainty. "But before you return, there is something you must see." I was not in one place, but in many at once. I saw scenes from my life, as if I were watching a movie in multiple dimensions. I saw moments of joy, moments of sadness, times when I had helped someone without even realizing it. But I also saw the moments when I had failed. Jesus showed me the impact of each of my actions. I saw how a simple smile I had given to a patient once had changed their day, and in turn their way of treating others. I realized how each decision, no matter how small, had an impact on the world. Then I understood that nothing is insignificant. Every act of love, every word of encouragement, every gesture of kindness leaves a mark on the universe. But what I saw next shook me. Jesus showed me a world filled with shadows, a world where humanity was drifting away from love, where indifference and selfishness were growing unchecked. I saw people trapped in their pain, unable to see the light. I saw tears, hunger, desperation, and the most unsettling thing of all, I saw how every decision made out of fear and hatred created ripples that spread out and affected far more people than we could imagine. I looked at Jesus in anguish. "Is this what awaits us?" I asked, without needing words. His response was calm yet firm. "The future is not set in stone. Every soul has the capacity to choose, and every choice, no matter how small it seems, defines the path." Then he showed me something else. I saw a world where love was the guide, where people helped each other without expecting anything in return, where compassion was the foundation of every decision. It was a bright world, filled with hope, and I understood that both realities were possible, but they depended on us. Jesus looked at me tenderly and said, "You must return and share what you have seen. Not everyone will listen, but those who do will remember that love is the key." In that moment, I felt something beginning to pull at me. The light started to fade, and a sensation of vertigo enveloped me. I tried to stay. I tried to cling to that world of peace. The next thing I knew, I was back in my body. I opened my eyes suddenly, feeling the electric shock of the defibrillator coursing through my chest. "Doug," Morales shouted, "we have a pulse," and relief washed over the faces of my colleagues. But for me, nothing was the same again, because now I know what lies on the other side. And I understand that the time we have here is more important than we can imagine. After waking up, things were confusing. I felt a burning in my chest, as if something had yanked me from the void and forced me to return. I couldn't process what was happening. I could only hear the distant sounds of voices around me. "We have a pulse, Doctor," Morales shouted, but I could barely grasp what it meant. I opened my eyes with difficulty and saw the faces of my colleagues leaning over me. Anna, my best friend, had tears in her eyes. She was holding my hand so tightly that I could feel her desperation. Next to her, a nurse was quietly sobbing. It seemed that no one could believe what had just happened. I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. I felt the oxygen mask on my face and the humming of the monitor marking my vital signs. It was then that panic hit me. I shouldn't be here, because what I had experienced, what I had seen, was not just a simple dream. It was real, more real than anything I had ever felt before. My body was back in the hospital, but my mind was still trapped in that vision, in the light and in the words of Jesus. I looked around the emergency room, recognizing every detail as if it were the first time I was there. But something had changed. Everything seemed sharper, more vibrant. Every person, every object, every sound had a kind of energy that I hadn't noticed before. It was as if my senses had expanded, as if I could now see beyond what was previously visible. The next few days were a mix of physical recovery and mental torment. The doctors explained to me in clinical detail how it was possible for me to survive, how epinephrine, chest compressions, and the defibrillator brought me back after nearly 5 minutes without vital signs. They talked about neurological hypotheses, about possible hallucinations caused by the lack of oxygen to the brain. But I knew the truth. What I had experienced wasn't just a biological reaction. I had been somewhere else, in a different dimension, and what I saw there changed me forever. I tried to tell them, tried to explain what I had seen, but every time I opened my mouth, I saw disbelief on their faces. Anna was the only one who didn't look at me as if I were delirious. She didn't say anything. She simply nodded. But how do you explain something that has no comparison in this world? How can you describe a place where time and space don't exist as we know them? How can you make someone understand what it is to stand in the presence of Jesus? and receive a message that you cannot ignore. I spent sleepless nights replaying every detail in my mind, wondering what I should do. Jesus had shown me visions of humanity, of a future that depended on the choices we make every day. He told me that love was the key, that every act, every word, every choice had a bigger impact than we can imagine. But how do you convey that in a world where hate and indifference seem to grow each day? It was then that something pulled me from my thoughts on my second night in the hospital. After waking up, I couldn't sleep. I found myself staring out the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Suddenly, I felt a chill run through my body, not from fear, but from a strange sense of familiarity. I turned my head and saw a woman standing on the other side of the room. She was a patient in a hospital gown, with dark hair cascading over her shoulders. But there was something about her that felt different. "You saw it, didn't you?" she said, her voice so soft I could barely hear it. I froze. "What?" I stammered. The woman took a step forward, and I knew I wasn't imagining things. "I know you saw it because I saw it too." The air grew thick, as if time had stopped. "Someone who also came back," she replied with a slight smile, "but not all of us do." I felt a chill run down my neck. "What do you mean?" "Some souls choose to stay. Some can't find their way back, and others don't want to return." Her gaze was intense, as if she could see inside me. "He gave you a message, didn't he?" she whispered. My breath caught in my throat. "Yes," I admitted. "Then you must share it, because time is shorter than you think." I blinked, and in an instant, the woman was gone. The monitor beside me continued to register my heartbeat. The sounds of the hospital remained the same, but the chill on my skin was real. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. Had it been real, or just a delirium caused by my exhausted mind? But deep down, I knew the answer. That woman had been there, and I couldn't ignore what she had told me. I spent the rest of the night wide awake. I couldn't stop thinking about that woman, her words, the way she looked at me. It was as if she knew exactly what I had seen, as if she had also been there, in that place of light and truth. Who was she? How did she know what had happened to me? I told myself over and over that maybe it had all been a hallucination, a product of my recovering mind. But something inside me insisted that it wasn't. The next morning, I decided to search for her. I struggled to get out of bed and inquired about the patient records from the previous night. But to my surprise, no one matched her description. There were no patients with those characteristics in the emergency room, in intensive care, or in any of the nearby rooms. It was as if she had never been there. My skin prickled at the thought that she might not have been an ordinary person. From that day on, I began to notice things I had never seen before. Small signs, impossible coincidences, moments when I felt a presence beside me, even though no one was in the room. It wasn't fear. It was something else, something like a quiet certainty. I felt that someone was guiding me, pushing me to fulfill the mission I had been given. But how? How to talk about something I didn't even fully understand myself. Days passed, and I was discharged. I returned home with my body recovered, but my soul in conflict. I had been saved, but a part of me felt that I had left something behind. Something I still didn't fully understand. I tried to return to my routine, but nothing was the same. Every time I walked into the hospital, I remembered the exact moment my heart stopped beating. Each time I looked at a critically ill patient, I thought about what awaited them on the other side. And every time I saw someone clinging to the fear of death, I felt the urge to tell them that death wasn't the end. But who would believe me? It was Anna who gave me the answer. One afternoon, after my shift, we sat down in the hospital cafeteria. She looked at me intently before speaking. "Since you came back, you're not the same," she said bluntly. "I see it in your eyes, in the way you speak, in how you look at your patients. I saw something that changed everything, something I don't know how to explain." Anna nodded. "Then tell me," she said. "Maybe you can't explain it, but tell me what you saw." I took a breath. For the first time since my return, I said it aloud. "I saw Jesus." She didn't laugh, didn't make any incredulous faces. She just waited for me to continue it. So I told her everything. From the moment I floated out of my body to the light, the tunnel, the feeling of absolute peace. I spoke of Jesus, of his gaze, of the things he showed me, of how every action in life had a greater impact than we could ever imagine. When I finished, Anna had tears in her eyes. "You're not alone," she whispered after a few seconds. "There are many stories like yours. Maybe your mission isn't to convince the skeptics, but to speak to those who are ready to listen." Her words echoed in my head for days. And it was then that I understood. I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to convince anyone. I just had to share my story and let it reach those who needed to hear it. From that moment on, everything changed. I began writing down what I remembered in more detail, every sensation, every image. I searched for other testimonies and discovered that many people around the world had experienced the same thing. Men, women, children, all with similar accounts. Some saw the light, others saw loved ones waiting, and still others saw something else. Because even though my experience had been one of peace, I had also felt the weight of the warning. Not everyone returned with the same story. Some came back with visions of darkness, of despair, from places where the absence of love was absolute. I realized that what I had seen was not just a message of hope. It was also a warning. Jesus had shown me two possible futures for humanity, one where love guided people, and another where selfishness and fear reigned. And the difference between the two was not a predetermined fate, but a choice. Each one of us decides, with every action, with every thought, which path we are contributing to. Then I knew I couldn't stay silent. If I had returned, it was for a reason. If you are watching this, it may be because you are ready to listen. From the moment I made the decision to speak, I felt a burden on my shoulders, a strange sensation of responsibility. I couldn't simply forget what I had seen. Something inside me urged me to share it, but at the same time, a part of me felt fear. What if people labeled me as crazy? What if they thought my experience was nothing more than a delusion from my brain on the edge of death? But then I remembered Jesus' gaze, the calm in his voice, when he told me it wasn't my time yet, and that I had to return. He didn't bring me back for no reason, so I began to write. I didn't exactly know for whom this message was intended, but I wrote it anyway. For entire nights I sat in front of my computer, trying to put into words what I had felt, what I had seen, what I knew to be true. Even though I couldn't explain it logically as I wrote, I relived every detail. The moment I floated out of my body, the immense peace of being in the light, the presence of Jesus and the message he gave me. But the deeper I dug into my memories, the more questions arose. Why did some souls seem to get trapped between this world and the next? Why did some return with messages of love while others brought back terrifying warning? I realized that although my experience had been comforting, there was something more that I still didn't understand. So I decided to investigate. I immersed myself in testimonies from other people who had near-death experiences. Stories of those who, like me, had crossed the threshold and returned with a message. And what I discovered left me stunned. Not all experiences were like mine. Some people described the same light, the same feeling of peace and unconditional love, but others spoke of something completely different. A dark place, beings radiating suffering, a sense of emptiness that seemed endless. I saw accounts of individuals who claimed to have felt pure terror, as if they had been pulled into an abyss from which they barely escaped. This deeply unsettled me. Why did some see heaven while others witnessed something more akin to hell? Jesus had told me that every action has consequences, that the future isn't set in stone, but rather depends on our choices. So, did our lives determine what we would see after death? I wanted to understand more, so I searched through ancient texts, spiritual writings from different cultures. I realized that in almost all traditions, the same idea existed. Love as the path to light, fear and selfishness as the path to darkness. Then I remembered something Jesus showed me during my experience. He took me to a place where I could see human choices as waves expanding, affecting not only those making them, but everyone around. He showed me how a single decision based on love could change a life, and how a decision based on fear could trigger a chain of suffering. I then understood that the message was not just about what lies beyond death, but about how our decisions in life create the future we will encounter on the other side. It was at that moment that I made the real decision. It wasn't enough to simply write about what I experienced. I had to share it. I had to ensure this message reached more people. The first step was to tell my family. I was scared they would look at me with disbelief, that they would think it was all a product of my recovering mind. But to my surprise, when I spoke to them about what I saw, what I felt, the words of Jesus, they were silent. There was no skepticism in their eyes, only amazement. My mother was the first to speak. With a trembling voice, she told me, "I've always believed there's something more after death, but what you're saying makes it even more real." My father, a man who rarely spoke about spirituality, nodded in silence. Then I understood that this message was already doing its work. But I couldn't just stop with my immediate circle. So I spoke to more people, colleagues from the hospital, childhood friends, acquaintances who, for some reason, I felt needed to hear it. The more I talked, the more I realized that many people had similar experiences, but had kept silent out of fear of ridicule. One night, after sharing my story with a small group, a man approached me with tears in his eyes. He told me that he had lost his wife a year ago and had been tormented by the fear of never seeing her again. "But if what you're saying is true," he murmured, "then she didn't just disappear. There's still hope." That's when I understood what Jesus was asking of me. It wasn't about convincing anyone or imposing a truth. It was about giving hope to those who needed it. It was about reminding people that death is not the end, that every action matters, that love is the key to what comes next. Then I realized the last part of the message. Jesus not only showed me what lies beyond death, he showed me what we can still do while we are here. He showed me that every life has a purpose, and that every person has the power to light up the world with their choices. From that day on, I stopped fearing death because I know what's on the other side. And I know that what really matters is love. Since the day I decided to share my story, my life changed forever. Before my near-death experience, I used to worry about things that now seem insignificant. I used to fret over the future, what others would say, work stress, the daily grind, which somehow always seemed bigger than they really were. But after seeing what I saw, after feeling the absolute peace of that place, after hearing Jesus's words and understanding the magnitude of our choices, I realized that life on earth is just part of something much larger. It doesn't mean the problems go away, but our perspective changes. What once felt unbearable is now just a small chapter in an infinite story. What once seemed unjust now has a purpose that we may not understand right away. And most importantly, What we do here leaves a mark that goes far beyond our earthly existence. Since then, my mission has been to share this message. I've spoken with hundreds of people who have gone through the same thing, who have crossed the threshold of death and returned with similar stories. And what I've learned is that there's a pattern in all these experiences. Each person who has been in contact with the afterlife comes back with the same truth. What truly matters is love. Not money, not success, not recognition, just love. Because when our time comes to depart, we won't take anything else with us. We won't take our possessions, our titles, or our material achievements. We will only take with us what we have given, the love we've shared, the marks we've left on others. And what's most incredible is that when we reach the other side, we're not judged by divine punishment, but by the clarity with which we can see the impact of our action. I remember when Jesus showed me how every small decision creates ripples that affect those around us at that moment, and how a simple act of kindness could change a person's life, how a word of encouragement could stop someone from giving up. Act of love could have consequences that extend for generations. But I also saw the opposite. I saw the pain we cause with our words and actions when we act out of fear, selfishness, or indifference. I witnessed how hopelessness spreads when we choose to ignore the suffering of others. And I understood that every day, in every moment, we are choosing between two paths, the path of love and the path of fear. Since returning, I try to choose love in everything I do. It doesn't mean I'm perfect, but every day when I wake up, I remember Jesus' words. Every choice matters. And with that phrase in mind, I do my best to live with purpose. I know there are many people who fear death. I know there are those who live with anxiety, with fear of the unknown, with uncertainty about what will happen when their time on this earth ends. But I want you to listen closely. Death is not the end. There is nothing to fear. What lies on the other side is more beautiful than we can imagine. And if you've made it this far, if these words have resonated with you, perhaps it's not a coincidence. Perhaps, as the woman told me that night in the hospital, time is shorter than we think. Perhaps it's time to start living with more love, to forgive more quickly, to let go of resentment, and to value those around us more. Perhaps it's time to remember that every action matters, that every word leaves a mark, and that each person we meet along our path is there for a reason. Jesus allowed me to return to share this, and now this message is yours. Do with it what you will, but if something inside you feels that this is true, if at any moment during this tale your heart raced, if something in you knows there's more than what we can see, then don't ignore it. Because love is the key, because love never dies. I'm Mariana Herrera, and today, after all I've lived through, I know that death is not the end. It's just the beginning. If this story resonated with you, I want to invite you to share it. Like this video, comment on which part impacted you the most, and subscribe so you don't miss more stories like this. Because every time we share these stories, we help more people find hope, peace, and purpose in their own lives. Death is not the end. It's just the beginning.